For commentaries, today we pick up with Genesis chapter 20, Bere'shiyth chapter 20. And Abraham journeyed from there toward the country of the south and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Elher and Avimelech, but Elohim came to Avimelech in a dream by night and said to him, for she is a man's woman, Adonai, will you slay also a righteous nation? Her shears in the and Elohim said to him in a dream, yea, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart, for I also withheld you from sinning against me. Therefore, I suffered you not to touch her. Again, this is an interesting passage here in Bere'shiyth 20. And we're going to see here that when we talk about this location, because Abraham is going to journey from there toward the south. And in fact, toward the country of the south, and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur. Now, it's very interesting when we talk about these names, Kadesh and Shur, because, of course, Kadesh, Kodesh. But we also see that Kadesh, when we look at this word Kodesh, according to Strong's, we see Kadesh is the same as Kadesh. And listen to a place in the desert, Kadesh, compared in a locative noun. Okay, well, Kadesh, Strong's 6945, again, spelled the same way as Kodesh, except with different vowel sounds, means a sacred person, i.e., technically, a male devotee by prostitution to a licentious idolatry, a sodomite, or a person who is unclean, coming from having met the king of Shalem, also the king of Sodom. Now, let's go back and review that for just a moment, because when we look at chapter 18 and 19, we see this idea of the two messengers coming to visit Abraham. And so Yahweh appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre on the day he sat at the tent door in the heat of the day, at the plains of Mamre. Okay. Now he's going south from there. He's journeying from there toward the south country. Abraham adds chane ve'ish ve bin shar. Okay, or tzor, or rather, Bechur. And so here, when we talk about this idea of the south country, what are we getting here in terms of it being designated as the south? Well, the word there is Negev. And the Negev actually does not mean south per se. When we look at the south from its drought, especially the Negev or the southern district of Judah, occasionally Egypt, south to Palestine, south countryside southward. So when we talk about south, south is actually an assumption that it's south because it is someplace parched. That is to say, the desert. Then Strong's goes to say, well, because it was parched and kind of desert, well, then it must be part of the southern district of Judah. Well, Negev. Negev meaning the desert area, the parched area. And so Abraham journeyed from there towards the country of the desert, and he dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourning to this. Nonetheless, it presents to Avimelech. Now, what is Avimelech? Well, Avi, of course, means our father, my father, in particular, my father, and Melech, the king. So Avimelech is literally means my father, the king, or my father, king. And so is this truly a name? Well, no, not really. But it could be. Testified to me that she was his sister, and she said, yeah, he is my brother. And of course, we know that Abraham was the brother of Sarah by another mother, and she was the sister of Abraham by another mother. And so Yah tells him in verse 7, now therefore restore the man his woman, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for you, and you shall live. And if you restore her, know not that you shall surely die. And all and were sorely afraid. Okay, now when we read here that Abraham was, does it mean that this is somebody who prognosticates? Does this mean that someone who foretells the future? Well, according to the Strongs, the word here is navi, and it comes from the word nava, which means to speak or sing by inspiration, in parentheses, in prediction, or simple discourse. Prophesying or to make oneself a prophet, generally an inspired man. An inspired man. So if you're talking about someone who is in to be. So this is what we see here. And of course, Abimelech called Abraham, and offended you, that you have brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin. You have done deeds to me that ought not to be done. Now, this is something that is very important because we're going to see this very same issue arise again with Yitzhak and Rivka. And Yitzhak is going to try to pull the same stunt. The only difference is that Sarah actually was Abraham's half-sister, and Abraham actually was Sarah's half-brother. But Yitzhak, they're cousins, not brother and sister. And Abimelech said, what is this that you do? Well, a misrepresentation. And Abraham did it, as I mentioned this to you before, that to come and present himself and saying, here's me, and this is my very beautiful wife. Well, that approach, of course, is an act of war. And if you're just by yourself with your wife, then you're going to be in some big trouble. But if you present her as your sister, well, then maybe you're not prepared to die for her. Maybe you're not prepared to protect her as much. And so it takes the edge off an approach that looks like war. And so what you see in those circumstances is that And when it happened that Elohim caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said to her, this is your kind oxen and manservants and women servants, and gave them to Abraham and restored him et Sarah, his woman. Now, again, here we have a very interesting issue that arises in the scriptural text here, and you have to ask yourself the question, is the scripture giving sanction to this kind of behavior, right? And what is this behavior? Well, you're talking about women's servants are called shifcha. Servants were called ebed. Now, we looked at this word earlier today in another context, ebed. To serve, to enslave, to be kept in bondage, to be a husbandman, to be a laborer, to do service, to be wrought, to be a worshiper. In the Arabic, ebed in the Ivrit, coming from the word abad, does mean slave. So this passage could very easily read, and Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male slaves and female slaves and gave them to Abraham and restored him at Sarah, his woman. And Abimelech said, behold, my land is before you, dwell where it pleases you. And to Sarah, he said, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to you a covering of the eyes to all that are with you and with others. Thus she was reproved. Okay, so at this point, when you realize that what he is saying is that Abraham is now her cover. He is a covering of the eyes. And so that anyone who looks on Sarah is actually looking on Abraham as, and so the land you want, pick out a spot. Here's some slaves, both male and female, and go live here and hold Sarah out as your wife and be her cover as her husband, right? Be her cover. And in this case, you see this word kesuth, and this word for cover. Now, this is a very interesting word, this kesuth, because this word comes from the word kasa. Now, kesuth, this means a cover, a garment, figuratively a veil, a covering, raiment, vestiture. But it comes from, it's the primitive root, and it means to fill up the hollows, by implication, to cover in clothing or in secrecy, right? To close, to clothe, to conceal, to cover, to hide, to overwhelm. So when you look at this idea of this word kasa, and you see in the passage of Psalms, in the passage of Psalms, in Psalm 81, verse 3, you have this idea of blow the shofar on the moon, okay? But when we look at this moon, we're going to see we have this root word here, kasa, which is Kaf Samek He. And the word found here in Psalm 81:3, or Kasa. Now, Kasa is a spelling that shows Kaf Samek Aleph, but its alternative spelling is Kaf Samek He. Okay, so Kasa, Kaf Samek He, the same as Kese, Kaf Samek He, misspelled Kaf Samek Aleph, because they're going to give it suddenly a different meaning, and even Strong says, well, this is apparently from the word kasa, and which means, of course, to cover. And instead they say, well, in this case, kasa is going to mean something entirely different. This means the fullness of the moon, or the full moon and its festival. Well, where did you get that? Well, there's only two places where this word kasa appears at all, here in Psalm 81:3 and also in Proverbs 7:20. He has taken a bag of money with him and will come home at the day appointed, is how it's translated in Proverbs 7:20. But imagine it being, say, that he had taken a bag of money with him and will come home on the concealed day. He will come home on the day of concealment, right? And so that verse makes much more sense, not on the day appointed, rather on the day concealed. And we see here that the full moon is not what's accurately being said at all, but rather the covered moon, because the word is asa, not keseh. And so we can see here that this idea of Abraham being a cover for Sarah means that he is going to conceal her. His approach to her, his cover over her, is something that conceals her. Melech says, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver, and he is to you a covering of the eyes to all that are with you and with others. Thus she was reproved. And Elohim healed Avimelech and his woman and his men. All the wombs of the house of Abraham's long. We're not giving that detail. But it was long enough for them to notice that all of the women of Avimelech and his maidservants were not having any children. None of them were getting pregnant during this period of time. Quite fascinating, quite interesting. All right. Let's continue into chapter 21. Chapter 21. And Yahweh visited at Sarah as he had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born to him, whom says his son Yitzchak, being 8 days old, as Elohim had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Yitzchak was born to him. And Sarah said, Elohim has made me laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah could have given children suck? For I have borne him a son at his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Yitzchak was weaned. Okay, so a number of things here in this opening chapter of 21. And this is an extremely important chapter, because we're going to get the conception of Yitzchak is going to be one where I see this conception as really the miraculous provision of an ovum in Sarah who had none, and the And so really the both of them are revived, but there is this placement of a miraculous ovum. And this placement of a miraculous ovum, I think, is really important, because what it does is it tells you that there is a brand new, clean, if you will, mitochondrial DNA that is appearing in Sarah. It is a brand new X chromosome that does not have a tie back to Hua. Rather, this ovum is created in the heavens with a new crystal clean, pure water DNA. And this is going to become the good news, because it is this good news that the line of us is the good news in Isaiah 61, that Sarah would give birth. And so when we look at Isaiah 61, let me go to that just one moment. When we get to Isaiah 61, it's in here somewhere. Let's see. Word for flesh. Well, I mean, the good news is flesh. You could say, well, yeah, the good news is that the word was made flesh and tabernacled among us. Now, of course, that is a form of the good news. But see, the word Besara preached in the scripture is in Isaiah 61. And Isaiah 61 begins like this. The breath of Adonai Yahweh is upon me, because Yahweh has anointed me to preach the Basara to the meek. And he has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, the recovery of the sight to the blind, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim all the duty for act of heaviness, that he might be glorified. Now, when we talk about this idea of good tidings, the Strong's gives this as basar, not besor, even though it is beit samek resh, or excuse me, beit sin resh. I think this is the primitive root, properly to be fresh, i.e. full, to announce good news, to preach, to publish, to show forth, to bear, bring, carry, preach, tell good tidings. Okay, good tidings are given. But I say to you, because the basara, when we look at this word and we say, okay, well, is this, what do we find in the actual? What we find is, yes, we find la basar, right? La basar. And so when we see this, though, the bait is actually a prefix saying in Sarah. In Sarah, because Yahweh appointed me to preach the news that is in Sarah, being the body of Sarah by the miraculous hand of Yahweh, who provided the ability for Sarah to give birth when she could not. And neither could Abraham, and because of her old age. And yet in the life of Sarah and in the life of Abraham's 100 years old when Yitzhak is born. Why wait this long? Well, it's interesting because this is all a mark of the sojourning of Abraham because the sojourning of Abraham is going to take 400 alone, and 215 will be in the seed of Abraham in the house of Yasharel, years, 35 of which was in hard slavery before the Exodus arose. Okay, and carrying on in verse 9, and Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Mitzrayim, which she had borne to Abraham, my bondwoman, her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Yitzchak. And this thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son Ishmael. Ishmael is not in the text, but nonetheless, Abraham is grieved because because Sarah has said, you must cast out Ishmael and Hagar. And Elohim said to Abraham, let us not be grievous in your sight because of the lad and because of your bondwoman, in that all that Sarah has said to you, hear her voice. And also of the son of the bondwoman, I will make a nation because he is your seed. Okay, but you can see that the sons of Abraham, the idea of the TDNA, so true that it made more. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation because he is of your seed. But he will not be called after the seed of Abraham. He will become a great nation, but he will not be called after the seed of Abraham. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, took bread and a bottle of water, gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away. She departed and wandered into the wilderness of Beersheba, which is the name of a well. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat bowshot, for she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat near him and lifted her voice and wept. And Elohim heard the voice of the lad, and the messenger of Elohim called to Hagar out of the heavens and said to her, what ails you, Hagar? The voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift the lad, and hold him in your hand, and I will make him a great nation. She opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink. And Elohim was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. He became an archer, an important point. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran. And his mother took him, a woman, out of the land of Mitzrayim. Now remember, Hagar was a Mitzrayim, and Ishmael was half Mitzrayim, half Hebrew. And his mother picks him a woman out of the land of Mitzrayim. And it happened at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of the host, spoke to Abraham, saying, Elohim is with you in all that you do. Now, therefore, swear 7 oaths to me of 7 oaths. This is a unique feature that appears only in the Cepher of talking about 7 oaths. But I want to talk to you about this phrase, and let's see what the word is that is being construed as 7 oaths. Okay, one moment. And now the word here is Shabbat. Shabbat. Now, this is the root word for Saturday, to Shabbat, a primitive root, because why is the seventh day called Shabbat? Because it completes the week, but only used as a denominative form, fractional number, meaning 7. 7 times, by implication, a week, right? Sheba, that is going to describe Saturday or the 7th day. An indefinite number, 7-fold. Okay. And here, this root Shabbat means what? to seven oneself, to swear as if by repeating a declaration 7 times, to adjure a charge by an oath, to feed the, or to make to swear. So here you can see Shabbat, literally coming from the root 7, means to swear by repeating a declaration 7 times, i.e. to 7 oneself. And this is why where the word Shabbat appears in the text, in the Cepher, you'll see that it says what? That, and Abraham said, I will swear 7 Abimelech because of a well of water, which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And Abimelech said, neither do I know who has done this thing, nor did you took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and both cut a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewes of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what do these 7 ewe lambs mean which you have set by themselves? And he said, these 7 ewe lambs you shall take off my hands, that they may be a witness to me that I have dug this well. Therefore he called that place Beersheba, because there both swore 7 oaths. The well of the oath, right? Beersheba. So what does the bear mean? The bear means the well, and Sheba means what? 7, swearing 7 oaths. Because they both swore 7 oaths, then it was called Beersheba, or the well of sevens. And Pekah, the chief captain of his host, and they returned into the land of the Pelishtim. And Abraham planted a grove at Beersheba and called there on the name of Yahweh El Olam, that is Yahweh forever. And Abraham sojourned in the Pelishtim's land for many days. Okay, so we know now that Gerar was in the land of the Pelishtim, and Abimelech was a king of the Pelishtim. Okay, and remember that this name Abimelech is not really a name, but rather a title. Okay, that concludes our reading of Genesis chapter 20 and chapter 21.